Hello and welcome to Strat News Global and Surya Gangadharan. In Books Corner, I have with me Claude Arpi, who's written a seminal work, the fourth volume of his Tibet series. And we're going to talk to him not only in the context of Tibet, but also in the context of what's going on in eastern Ladakh in the past few months. Mr. Arpi, thank you and welcome.
Thank you to you.
Mr. Arpi, this is the fourth volume of your series on Tibet. And where did you get onto a research of this kind?
You see, I'm following what's happening in China, and I see that China is so good at propaganda that they just change the history. And I spent 4 or 5 years of my life, last 4 or 5 years, doing this research in National Archive, in the Nehru Memorial Library, and other places, because I wanted to put on record that what the Chinese propaganda says about Tibet today, it is not true, and it has not always been like that. And Tibet and India had a very deep relation since centuries, actually. And the entire Himalayan belt had this relation. So I wanted to put this on record. And not on, you see, very often you find books written by American about the CIA role in Tibet and like that. But you never find anything written about the relation between India. One of the reasons is that the archives are closed and it's very difficult of access. But it's what I wanted to put. So I did that so that it keeps on record the close relation, art relation between Tibet and India.
You mentioned that parts of the archives are closed to your research. Was there any reason why the MEA gave you that? MEA shuts those doors?
That's a very complicated issue, but basically the MEA should have a historical division. Till the 1990s, there was an historical division. Every Ministry of Foreign Affairs or External Affairs in the world has a historical division. When you have an issue in Depsang or in Galwan, the person who is responsible for the relation with China, he will not know the historical background. So he has to refer to that historical division. Now, for some reason, because people say that some of the officers, they believe they know everything, which is not always the case. You have to refer to some professionals which are outside the ministry, but part of the ministry as a division. Now, that's the basic thing. And the second problem is also that the Ministry of External Affairs do not transfer the files to the National Archive of India. By law, they have to, after 25 years, it's compulsory to transfer this file. It's not done because mainly they don't have the personnel. They would have to take outside people to do that job of historian. It's basically a job of historian, and they are diplomats. It's two different jobs. So as a result, I didn't get all the file that I wanted. Mainly between 1960 and 62 were two very crucial years because it's just before the war, the border war with China. So I tried to reconstitute as much as I could, but maybe I have not done fully what I was wanting to do.
Now, I've gone through your book. The impression one gets is that India perhaps did not put up the kind of diplomatic fight, perhaps, the political fight, perhaps, to retain its position in Tibet. Would you agree with this? Is this what you're trying to say?
I have 200% agree with this. I mean, we are all aware of that letter of Sardar Patel on the November 7, 1950, just 1 month after the invasion of Eastern Tibet. And in that letter, Sardar Patel, in 4 pages, detailed the implication for India. It was not only the implication for Dalai Lama, the Tibetan people, the Tibet as a nation, but the implication for the frontiers of India. And what we see today in Eastern Ladakh is just a consequence. Though the operation in Eastern Ladakh are more with Xinjiang than Tibet, but it's a consequence of that policy. And it's very unfortunate. And in 1954, again, there was a 4 months negotiation for the Panchil, and India gave away all the advantages and all India had a consulate general. India had three Indian trade agency, ITAs, one in Yatong in Chumbi Valley, very close to Sikkim, one in Gyeongsang in central Tibet, and one in Gartok, which was very important, which is in western Tibet, in Nari province of Tibet, and which was dealing and monitoring all the trade between the Himalayan region and Tibet. And that trade provided livelihood to the entire what is Garhwal, what is Uttarakhand today, Kinnaur, Spiti, Ladakh. Everyone would live of this trade. And suddenly, once the 1954 agreement was signed, China progressively started closing down this border and cutting the livelihood of the people of this Himalayan region, which is a tragedy.
Realistically, what is it that India could have done? We were a newborn country, militarily no position to take on China. Perhaps that was a realization with Nehru. Do you think that was the reason?
You see, the British, they were good strategists. To build an empire, you have to be good strategists. Just before they left, a few months before, they prepared a note how to defend Tibet. They drew a line, Chamdo, Lhasa, and Western Tibet. And they said, either if the Russians or the Chinese cross that line, we will have to intervene militarily. So there was a lot of discussion, mainly in the air headquarters, how many squadrons you would require. Some people said 3 squadrons will be enough to defend Tibet, some 7. Now, India became independent and became pacifist, idealist, romantic, and said that we should be friends with everybody, and China and India had the same history of colonialism, so we should be friends. So it's totally change of mindset. But at the same time, some of the officers, Indian officers posted in Tibet, like Mr. Sumal Sinha, was the head of the mission till 1950. Till 52, sorry, and Harishwar Dayal, who was a political officer in Sikkim, suggested that if the Chinese invade Tibet, let's take Chumbi Valley and force them to negotiate. So that was one possibility. Of course, it was rejected absolutely by the government of that time, and but it was certainly one of the possibility. And another one that I should mention, that General Natu Singh, who was Army Commander, Eastern Command, who was very bright and who would speak very frankly, including to the Prime Minister, wrote, "Give me a brigade. I will defend Tibet, and I will stop their advance." But it was a political choice. And it happened now. It's very difficult to undo the political choice which has been done in the past.
Tell me about Kailash Mansarovar. Given the historic and traditional links with Ladakh, is there a case for saying that Kailash Mansarovar actually belongs to us? I mean, is that tenable?
No, there was a small village called Minsar, which belonged to Ladakh, to the Maharaja of JNK. And still today on paper, that village, that small enclave, the use of this enclave was to collect revenue to pay for the butter lamps and all the offerings for the pilgrims going to Kailash Mansarovar. But you see, the government of India at that time said, we are not colonialists, we don't want any foreign enclave in other countries. So once they had accepted that Tibet was no more independent country, suddenly they said, we don't want to interfere with Minsar, because it could be compared to Goa, for example, which was a Portuguese enclave, or Pondicherry, a French enclave. So at that time, they thought, let's drop Minsar. And I want to mention also that the Bhutanese had 8 enclaves in Tibet around the Kailash. And one, Darchen, is a very important town. Was the base camp for the Kailash Parikrama. And still it's on paper. And I think the Bhutanese once or twice asked the Chinese diplomats about it, but they don't want to hear about it. But it's still on paper. It belongs to Bhutan or Minsak to India.
So can it be used as some kind of diplomatic leverage against China, or we have foreclosed that option?
I think it can be used, but the issue is how you will manage this place, which is very far away. If you don't have, you see, today it's very difficult to go to Tibet. Apart from the 3 trade ports in Liput, Klek, Chipkila, and Natula, which are open only for the local population and for a restricted amount of time. And when they go to Tibet, they stay a few hours and come back. Otherwise, a normal Indian citizen cannot go to Tibet. You have to remember that before the 1954 Panchshir, so-called Panchshir agreement, Indian could travel to Kailash Mansarovar without a visa, without any papers. And it's what India lost. When in 1950, when India did not intervene and put its foot down to the invasion of Tibet, India lost so many things like that. Any Indian could go. Now you have a very complicated Kailash Yatra, which is organized by MEA. I mean, complicated in the sense that only a few hundred people can go every year. This year it's cancelled again. In 2017 during Doklam it was cancelled. So India has lost this and has lost the entire trade. China is speaking about the Silk Roads. Is speaking about CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. But what about the hundreds of corridors between the Himalayan region and Tibet? Demchok is closed. From Demchok in the west to Kibutu in the east, everything is closed. Once in a while, you have this BPM, this border post meeting, but it's just for India's independence or China's Republic Day on October 1st. But there is no more people-to-people contact. So it's what India lost. So when China speak about having Silk Roads, what about these, which are the original Silk Roads? This is gone.
So what would you say is missing in India's Tibet policy? What is that big gap that you see?
I think so many things are missing. And what was wrong in 2018 when the government asked each and every official from the government, including the army, including the corps, which is based in Yol, they were not allowed to meet the Dalai Lama. That is wrong, because since 1959, Dalai Lama was not allowed to do politics, but he was allowed to meet anybody he wants. That was wrong. What is missing today is coordination. You know, I think India needs a coordinator for Tibet affairs and for Himalayan affairs. And this coordination should come only from the PMO. Because if you have only the Home Ministry, he will deal only with visa restriction and all this. If you have someone from the MEA, he will deal only with the diplomatic. He will be even more shy to take a bold decision. So same thing if you take from MOD, that person will see only from MO point of view for military operation. You need someone who can coordinate with Dharamsala, the policy. And Dharamsala also has to speak out what's our policy vis-a-vis India and vis-a-vis the borders. Now the middle path approach of the Central Tibetan administration unfortunately do not take into account the borders of India, because in that middle path approach, the foreign affairs and defense are with China. China will not agree, but suppose they would agree, it doesn't solve the India's problem on the border. Because the defense and foreign affairs, the border comes under defense and foreign affairs. So that will not solve. So I think India should have discussion with the Tibetan. Very soon there'll be a new president in Dharamsala. What Tibet wants, what the Tibetan wants. But you have to realize that whatever happens in India, people in Tibet will know. When these operations south of Pangong Lake took place, I think the entire population in Tibet got to know what has happened and what role the Tibetan. And they can see that the Tibetans are genuinely with India by art, by culture, by civilization. Even if you take the Tibetan scripts, it's derived from a Gupta script.
Yeah.
So their religion derived from the Nalanda tradition. So Tibetans are much closer to India than to China. And whatever happened in India, it has consequences. That's why Mr. Xi Jinping is so nervous that last month he conveyed that big 7 Tibet work forum, and there was 250 or 300 officials, the top official, including the member of the Central Military Commission, the member of the Politburo, all the top provincial leaders, and very few Tibetans, no Lama. But they are nervous of what's happening on the border. They are speaking of stabilization of the border. Every 2 words they speak about stabilization of the border. So I think it's one thing that India should look into, because their border is not stable because of the Tibetan factor. I don't call it card. Card is not a nice name, but there is a Tibetan factor, and there's a closeness between India and Tibet.
How would you say we've used this Tibet factor, as you put it? Have we used it at all?
I think very in a confused manner, in different. I think India, the government should think, and at the highest level, I'm thinking, saying, to have a Tibet policy, a coherent and coordinated Tibet policy. Coordination is the key. Otherwise, one ministry will do one thing and another ministry will do another thing. So I think it has to come from the top and from the PMO, and it should be closely linked with Himalayan regions also, which are some of these regions, like Ladakh is a Buddhist region, and also Tawang and some other area in Arunachal, in Upper Subansari or Upper Siang, Spiti, Kinnaur in Himachal. So the policy should be coordinated. They should not be just ad hoc and just doing something because something else happened. No? There's never been a coordination.
Yeah. I mean, the question here is, would that violate the agreement India has made that Tibet is a part of China, I mean, does it in any way shake that, since we are so rule bound, so legally bound?
Yeah, in one way it will be, it will shake a little bit the one China policy, but China is checking whatever they want from India. I mean, when they enter things that they have, officially they never given their maps. In 2003, they showed the maps for 20 minutes, they withdrew the maps, but it was more or less an agreement that the LAC is there, or in some places there's 2 perceptions, so there's a gap in between, and this gap will be patrolled by both parties. But they go back to their agreement. That's the main issue. Vis-a-vis Tibet, they've gone back on the 1951 agreement, the 17 points agreement. They had told the Dalai Lama, you keep, nothing will change for the internal autonomy of Tibet. We will just look after your defense. They didn't follow what they promised. Same thing in 1954. In 1958, they had an agreement with Barawati. You know what is strange? That it's not strange, but it is China's way of doing things. They signed in April 29, 1954, the Panchshir Agreement. 1.5 months later, they enter into Barawati. And if you look at border issues, border is defined by a watershed. Now, the watershed is absolutely clear in that area of Barawati. It's Tunjumla. The pass is called Tunjumla. South of Tunjumla is India, north is Tibet. But 2 months, less than 2 months after 54 agreement, they start entering and say this is our territory, not acknowledging that the fact to define a border is the watershed. What do you do? So in 58, again, there was a long negotiation for the Barawati, and they had agreed that both parties had agreed. India wanted to do a gesture because it was the first time that the border was negotiated. They said both parties, you can patrol without arms.
Yeah.
Next year they bring weapons.
Yeah.
You do. So it's a long history of breaking promises, breaking agreement. I'm not speaking about more recent, 93, 96, 2005. They agree the guidelines to solve the border issue. They said the inhabited area will not be changed. So India understood very clearly that they will not claim Tawang. 2-3 months later, they start again claiming Tawang. So it's difficult to deal with. And we know about the 5 round of talks at the corps commander level. They say something, and that's a difficult issue. I don't know what is the solution to.
No, what does it tell you about India, the way we negotiate, perhaps our inability to gauge what the Chinese are thinking or doing or plan to do, that we don't read the Chinese properly?
I think in India, in the past, I think it's much better. I think, for example, the minister, Dr. Jaishankar, can read better. In the 50s and 60s, nobody could read. They would read China with their own mindset.
Yeah.
There is that story when Mr. A.P. Venkateshwaran was the ambassador in China in the early 80s. The Politburo Chinese Communist Party was very fond of having movies. So the Indian embassy was lending movies to them. So one day they give Gandhi, the movie on Gandhi.
Yeah.
And they return it after 1 week. And Venkateshwaran asked the person, the official who returned it, how did the Politburo like it? It's very nice. They said, but what is this non-violence? See, you speak 2 languages. I think now among the youngsters, I think especially in the army, many officers are interested by China. There's not enough who are learning China, but unless you understand China, to learn the language and something I've not done, but and you can't understand who you're facing, and it ends up badly.
So, last question: in the current standoff in Eastern Ladakh, does that tell you that India is now prepared to make that jump from a rather passive and very subdued kind of attitude towards China to something a little more assertive?
I think so. I think it has opened many things are going to change. It will take some time, but you see the way the people think, it takes time to change. But something, for example, very clear. For example, the negotiation have been held at 3 levels. Against when Dr. Jaishankar met Wang Yi in Moscow, in the 5 point dimension, the main negotiation held by the army, by the corps commander and his counterpart, with only a major general. It's held at the SR level, the special representative, NSA, Mr. Doval, and his counterpart, Wang Yi again, and also at the Joint Secretary level, the Joint Secretary East Asia. So that is a change. If you look at the 50s, 60s, the Ministry of External Affairs would have a monopoly on this type of negotiation. There's no, what is wrong in this, that the Ministry of External Affairs cannot have the knowledge of the border that the army commander has.
Yeah.
The present corps commander has been DGMO, DGMI, Director General of Military Operation and Military Intelligence. You know each and every corner. They know the strategic that if you change 100 meters the LAC or the perception of the LAC, it will have huge implication for infrastructure you make. So this knowledge has not been with the Ministry of External Affairs because it's not their role. So in 1954, the big blunder was that they did not involve at all anybody from the defense side or even from the security side. So today, that's a huge progress already. So and India started also to retaliating in different ways. Okay, you do this to us on the border, TikTok finish, and hopefully 5G and all will follow. So they will slowly understand. Unfortunately, I don't know why China is like that, but they understand only this type of language. And nobody wants a war, but you have to. If India remains firm, I think Mr. Xi Jinping will have a lot of problems within his own party, and he will be questioned. Now, next month, the fifth plenary will take place. They're supposed to discuss economic issues, but I'm sure they will ask him, why did you go in that thing? What you were planning to get? What are we benefiting? Even if they are hiding to their own people the truth, that it will be asked in the party. So I think India should hold very firm, even if it takes time. It will take time. It will not be a lot of resource, lot of energy. We'll have to go into it, but India should hold firm. And Tibet, if it's not a card, at least it's a very important factor. So this, with a better coordination with Dharamsala, and something could change.
Anything else planned on Tibet, Mr. Arpi? Any other book?
I've written 4, so I don't know. Now I'm concentrating. I'm working on the border issue and the history of the border because not much has been written, and I've written too much on Tibet. And but I was very gratified to have been able to put it on records that the very close relation between Tibet and India. Because now we call it China-India border, but it has been for centuries and centuries Tibet-India border. And you didn't need to have one division in Demchok or one battalion even. People were crossing the border.
Yeah.
People knew where was the border. There was no question of LAC. LAC is another invention of China also, which doesn't help India. So people were crossing the village of Demchok, they were in Ladakh, or going to Tashigang in Tibet, they were in Tibet. And who cares for the ridge on the right or the ridge on the left?
Yeah.
But now every ridge has to be fought for, otherwise it's taken by the other side. So something India lost so much. I think that letter from Sardar Patel, which was drafted by Sir Girja Shankar Bajpai, was the Secretary General of the Ministry of External Affairs, and was distributed to to Rajaji, to President Rajadan Prasad, to KM Munshi, to all the leaders. And that was an important letter because it shows that many of the top leaders in India realized that India was losing a frontier, a peaceful frontier. So by losing Tibet, of course, Dalai Lama has lost his country. Tibetans are refugees now in India, but India lost so much also. It lost border.
Yeah.
And a border which was not barrier, it was all the monks from Ladakh in 1962 when my book and there was 400 monks from Ladakh.
Yeah.
They managed to take them out just before the war, but and they were free. They no passport, no paper, no identity. They were just going because it was like that for centuries. Same thing with town. What to do?
So looking forward to your next book, Mr. RP, and thank you for this interview. Looking forward to talking to you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.